Welcome to Lesson 11 in your Citizenship studies. This is all about extreme regimes. The three regimes that we're looking at today are all about control, and they are fascism, authoritarianism, and totalitarianism. What these three regimes have in common are the fact that they try to control people through coercion and repression. And coercion comes from the prefix co, which means together, and then the Urshan bit, irk, comes from ark, which is mostly known for Noah's Ark, but also things like the Ark of the Covenant. And it's all about an ark is a container, if you like. It's like a big box, a protective box. So if you coerce somebody, you kind of put them together in your box. You basically control them. You stop them from being free. And repression is very similar. So repression is about keeping people in one place where you want them, effectively. So fascism, authoritarianism, and totalitarianism are all about coercion and repression. Totalitarianism, to start with, the clue is in the word total. Totalitarianism is a form of government in which the state's power is absolutely unlimited, and the state controls virtually all aspects of public and private life, and this control extends to all political and financial matters, as well as the attitudes, morals, and beliefs of the people. So it is a form of total control. Everything is included. So what can you expect to see in a totalitarian regime? So this will be relevant for part of your worksheet in your booklet. Things that you can expect to see are rule enforced by a single dictator. There's usually one person in charge who dictates the rules of the regime. Also, you can expect to see the presence of a single ruling political party. There will be strict censorship, if not total control of the press. So there'll be no free press. There'll be constant dissemination of pro-government propaganda. So propaganda comes from the verb to propagate, which means to grow or breed, if you like. So propaganda, as you'll know from your history studies, is the sharing of information, whether it be posters, pieces of writing, speeches. It's information designed to sway people's viewpoints, not necessarily towards the truth, but towards the ideas that the people in charge want you to be thinking about. There will also be, in a totalitarian regime, mandatory service in the military for all citizens. There will be mandatory population control practices. So mandatory means you have to do it. Population control means choice of whether you have children or not. There will be prohibition, so the banning of certain religious or political groups and practices. There will be prohibition of any form of public criticism of the government, and there will be laws potentially enforced by secret police forces or the military. Ancient examples of totalitarian regimes might be dynasties in countries such as China and India. Modern examples would be the Big Four of Benito Mussolini in Italy, Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany, Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union, and Mao Zedong in China, People's Republic of China. And totalitarianism is typically distinguished from dictatorship, autocracy, or tyranny by its goals of replacing all political institutions with new ones and the elimination of all legal, social, and political traditions. So basically, totalitarianism is about the complete removal of anything that existed before, almost as if it never existed in the first place, and it's replaced with new institutions. Second box, green box, totalitarian governments typically pursue a special goal, such as industrialization or imperialism. And the idea is that by having that one key goal, it mobilizes the whole population in its favor. So regardless of the cost, all resources are devoted to achieving that special goal. Purple box, every government action is explained in terms of realizing that goal. And this allows a totalitarian state the widest latitude of action of any form of government. And what that means, latitude of action, it means they can pretty much do what they want because it's all about the goal. If we're achieving the goal, well, we need to do this, we need to do that, we're achieving the goal. No dissent or internal political differences are allowed. Not allowed. And then the final box, because, and this is key, because pursuit of the goal is the foundation for the totalitarian state, like this is what we're heading for, we're looking for industrialization or so on, achievement of the goal can never actually be acknowledged. So rather than saying, we've got there, guys, everything's cool, we can now exist in this way, a totalitarian government will never admit or accept that the goal has been achieved. And that's how they keep people repressed and under a state of permanent coercion into following the rules that are set by the people or person in power. Let's have a look at authoritarianism and see what the differences are between this and a totalitarian regime. So under an authoritarian regime, it's similar, but you do have limited political freedom. There are strict government controls imposed on political institutions and groups, but there are some political freedoms. An authoritarian regime is a very controlling regime still, though, that justifies itself to the people as a necessary evil, uniquely capable of coping with easily recognizable societal problems such as hunger, poverty, and violent insurgency. So an authoritarian leader will say, we're doing this for you. So I'm putting these things in place because this is how we're going to deal with a societal problem like hunger or poverty. This is what's needed. It's not nice, we don't want to go through it, but this is what we have to do. There are, under this sort of regime, strict government-imposed constraints on social freedoms, such as suppression of political opponents and anti-regime activity. So you still need to be very careful about what you say. And finally, there is normally the presence of a ruling executive with a vague shifting kind of idea of the powers that they hold. So rather than a single individual autocrat, as it were, or totalitarian leader on their own, there will be an executive, which gives sometimes the appearance of a vague idea of group rule, potentially hinting at the fact that because there's more than one voice, it might be less dangerous than a totalitarian government, but it's still very much a system of control. The final regime for us to look at is fascism. So fascism you will have come across in your history lessons, you might have heard it referred to in the news in recent years. In terms of Neofascism, we don't tend to use the word fascism in modern circumstances simply because it was very specific, which you'll see in a moment, in terms of the way that the word was used and how it was devised and formed. And what we tend to do now is call something neo-fascism, which means kind of a new version of fascism. Because what fascism was, it was a form of government combining the most extreme aspects of both totalitarianism and authoritarianism. And even when compared to very extreme nationalistic ideologies, fascism is typically considered to be at the absolute far right end of the political spectrum. Fascism is characterized by the imposition of dictatorial power, government control of industry and commerce, and the forcible suppression of opposition, often at the hands of the military or a secret police force. Fascism was first seen in Italy during World War I, later spreading to Germany and other European countries during World War II. One of the biggest indicators of fascism as opposed to totalitarian or authoritarian regimes, and it's a fine line, but the thing about fascism is it's a combination of ultra-nationalism, and nationalism is an extreme devotion to one's own nation over all others. And ultranationalism is a combination of that plus a widely held belief among the people that the nation must and will somehow be saved or reborn. And rather than working for concrete solutions to economic, political, and social problems, fascist rulers divert the people's focus while winning public support by elevating the idea of a need for a national rebirth into almost like a virtual religion. So to this end, fascists encourage the growth of cults, of national unity and racial purity. And this is what happened in Europe, as we've seen from World War I to World War II. In addition, fascists view democracy and the electoral process as an obsolete and unnecessary obstacle to maintaining constant military readiness. They also consider a totalitarian one-party state as the key for preparing the nation for war and its resulting economic and social hardships. So fascism is the absolute hard right, almost to the point of, if you've seen those political spectrums, sometimes fascism is so far right, it's almost left. It's the absolute extreme. It's the idea of purifying a nation to the point where it's, according to the leaders in charge, at its absolute pinnacle, and at the same time it's absolutely devoted to continuing that purity, and to that end it's ready for war at all costs. This is why when situations crop up where people are seen to be espousing or talking about opinions that seem to be aligned with this kind of idea that one nation can be seen as superior to another. This is why people like the United Nations that we looked at before half term will step in, because the dangers are clear. History has shown us the dangers of fascism and what can happen when these kind of ideas are allowed to flourish.